My name is Travis Hale, and this happened during my night shift at a lonely gas station off Route 9 in New Jersey. I thought I was there to make money, not to be counted. I had been working the night shift at that gas station for almost a year, a lonely outpost on a stretch of road that twisted between dark woods and abandoned homes. The fluorescent lights buzzed constantly, flickering in the corners like nervous eyelids, and the hum of the old soda coolers was the only companion I had in the dead hours. It was past 2 a.m. when he first walked in, slow, deliberate, and silent. I noticed him immediately, because even in a town filled with strange characters, there was something unnatural about the way he moved. His gray trench coat clung to him like wet skin, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the harsh lights so that I couldn't see his eyes, and his shoes made no sound against the cracked linoleum. I had been stocking the shelves, my hands trembling slightly, as if anticipating a storm, when I realized the bell above the door hadn't rung. He was just there, standing by the candy aisle, as though he had materialized from the darkness outside. He picked up a single Snickers bar and slid it toward the counter. I glanced down, half expecting him to fumble or speak, but he didn't. From the depths of his coat pocket, he withdrew a coin, an old, tarnished silver quarter, and placed it on the counter with a faint clink that echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the walls like a warning. He leaned closer than seemed possible, his sunglasses almost touching mine, and for a moment I thought I felt his breath against my skin, cold and metallic, carrying a scent I couldn't name. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The quarter seemed to pulse in my palm, and the edges felt unnaturally sharp, like a blade pressed into my flesh. Then he tilted his head slowly, just slightly, and I swear I saw something move under the dark lenses, something alive. He didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge me in any human way. He simply left, gliding toward the door, and vanished into the night. I blinked, trying to convince myself I had imagined it, but when I checked the security camera later, the footage had a strange flicker. There were moments where his figure seemed blurred, stretched, almost wrong, as if he didn't entirely exist in this world. My stomach tightened with a dread I hadn't known before. Something about him wasn't just odd, it was predatory, and I knew deep in the pit of my stomach that he would come back. And when he did, I wouldn't just be serving candy and coins. I would be part of whatever this was. By the third night, I was no longer just uneasy. I was on edge, my nerves raw, every shadow in the store crawling with possibility. He returned exactly 1 hour after his first visit, like clockwork, and the precision itself was terrifying. This time, he didn't just buy a candy bar. He moved with an almost ritualistic deliberation, browsing the aisles as though he were inspecting something invisible, something only he could see. The fluorescent lights flickered again as he walked past, and I noticed the faintest trace of something on his coat, a smear of dark crimson that didn't reflect the light. My stomach knotted, but when I blinked, it was gone. He never spoke, never smiled, yet the air around him carried a weight, thick and suffocating, that made it hard to breathe. Each time he placed a coin on the counter, it rang out with a metallic ping that echoed far too long, vibrating through the tiles, into my hands, almost into my bones. It wasn't just money he was exchanging. It was a message I couldn't read, and I felt as though with each coin I took, I was being measured, tallied, and marked. By the 4th hour, I started noticing things I couldn't explain. The candy he selected seemed to rot in his hands, the chocolate oozing a dark, sticky residue that disappeared before I could react. When he passed the refrigerated aisle, frost bloomed unnaturally on the glass, curling like skeletal fingers toward him, then retreating when I looked directly. I tried to stay behind the counter, pretending to tally the register, but I couldn't stop staring at him. There was a subtle twitch in his hand when he held the coin, and the way his head tilted made it seem almost like he was listening to some secret rhythm, a counting only he could hear. The clock ticked, slow and hollow, each second dragging as he moved. Then I realized the most horrifying thing. The shadows in the corners of the store weren't following him. They were fleeing from him, retreating into the walls, leaving the space around him unnaturally empty, as if the dark itself feared him. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but my voice had gone dead, caught in a tight knot of fear. By the time he left, the store felt like a tomb, the air thick with something organic and metallic, something alive that had been left behind, whispering promises I didn't want to understand. And in that moment, I knew he wasn't just visiting the store. He was visiting me, checking in, counting me, and the thought made my skin crawl, raw and prickling, as if the coin he left had already burrowed under my fingernail, rooting itself there. The fourth night, I arrived at work knowing he would come. I had barely closed the door behind me when the first sound hit me. Soft, metallic clinks, like coins rolling across the tile, echoing impossibly loud in the dead store. I froze, staring at the aisles, but there was no one there. The air had grown thick, heavy, carrying a metallic tang that made my tongue feel thick and coppery. I tried to shake it off, but the sound persisted, growing louder, sharper, almost deliberate, like someone or something was counting. 1, 2, 3, a voice whispered, low and guttural, seeming to crawl from the floor itself, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. My heart thudded in my chest, a panicked drumbeat that seemed to synchronize with the clinking. I ran to the counter, shaking, fumbling with the register drawer, and that's when I noticed the coins inside weren't still. They were spinning, rolling in perfect chaotic circles, as though propelled by invisible hands. Some of them bore strange scratches, twisted lines etched deep into the metal, almost like faces screaming silently. And then he appeared. The doorbell didn't ring. He was just there, standing in the fluorescent haze, coat damp, sunglasses glinting like black mirrors. In his hand was a single coin, spinning slowly on his fingertip. When he placed it on the counter, the clinking escalated, an unbearable cascade of echoes, like hundreds of coins tumbling down a well. I could feel vibrations crawling up my arms, my chest, and the back of my neck. The whispering grew louder, overlapping, multiple voices murmuring my name, counting me, layering over the metallic chorus. 4, 5, 6. His face didn't change, but the air around him shivered, and I noticed it. The floor beneath him had darkened, slick and glistening, as if soaked in something viscous, something alive. I recoiled, nearly falling over, but when I looked again, the slickness was gone, leaving only the cold, sterile tiles. My mind raced, trying to rationalize, but the fear had begun to root itself in me, deep and visceral. He leaned closer, almost touching me, the coin still spinning between his fingers, and I felt it, a pressure in my chest, like my very heartbeat had been measured, recorded, and marked. The bell above the door jingled once, faintly, and then he was gone, leaving the store echoing with clinks, whispers, and a sense of something crawling, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see him, the spinning coin, the trembling tiles, and I realized, with a chill that froze my soul, that the counting had just begun. And this time, I wasn't just being watched, I was being measured. By the fifth night, I was broken. I could barely force myself to step into the gas station, my hands trembling, my mind replaying the clinking whispers from the previous nights. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, as if warning me to turn back, but I couldn't. I needed to understand, or maybe just survive. And then I saw him, standing just beyond the cigarette racks, coat glistening with a wet sheen that smelled faintly of iron, sunglasses reflecting the buzzing lights like two cold moons. He held a single coin between his fingers, but it wasn't a quarter this time. It was old, pitted, blackened with tarnish, the surface etched with lines that formed jagged, screaming faces, tiny mouths open in eternal silent wails. I froze, the coin spinning slowly, almost hypnotically, between his fingers. My pulse raced as the air thickened, carrying a scent of decay and rust. Shadows stretched unnaturally around him, clawing at the floor and the walls, and the lights flickered faster, threatening to plunge the store into darkness. I wanted to run, but my legs refused, anchored by fear, by some unseen force pressing me to the counter. He leaned forward, closer than ever, until I could feel the metallic chill radiating from the coin onto my fingertips. When I touched it, pain exploded through my arm, a sharp, biting sensation like ice digging under my skin, and I realized it wasn't just cold, it was alive. The coin pulsed, vibrating with the rhythm of some malevolent heartbeat, and in the reflection of the glass door, I saw myself twisted, my mouth open in a silent scream I couldn't make. The whispers rose into a chorus, shrill and urgent, counting not just coins but moments, breaths, my own failing pulse. 7, 8, 9. The floor beneath me grew slick again, this time sticky and dark, almost like coagulated blood, and I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding a stack of fallen candy racks that rattled like skeletal limbs. When I looked up, he was gone. The coin lay on the counter, spinning slowly, perfectly alone, but the store wasn't empty. I could feel it in the air, crawling in my skin, circling my legs, whispering my name. And that's when I understood with a bone-deep, stomach-twisting horror. He hadn't just been visiting the store. He had been visiting me, counting me. And this coin, the last coin, wasn't payment. It was a claim. And by the time I staggered out into the cold night, gasping for breath, I realized the counting hadn't stopped. It had just shifted. From the shadows, from the tiles, from the very air around me, the tally continued, and I knew with icy certainty that the final chapter of my sanity, and perhaps my life, was about to begin. I haven't worked nights since. I quit, fleeing that cursed gas station, like a man running from a nightmare he could never outrun. But some things don't stay behind when you leave. I can still feel him. Sometimes, when I sit alone in my apartment, I feel the metallic pressure of the coin pressing into my pocket, though I haven't touched it in weeks. Last night, it returned, not physically, but in the air, a low vibration beneath my skin that prickled like a swarm of insects burrowing into my bones. The whispers returned too, faint at first, almost teasing, then rising to a deafening chorus, calling my name, counting me, recounting every fearful heartbeat, every shiver, every moment I had spent under his gaze. Shadows twisted along the edges of my vision, writhing like snakes made of smoke and broken glass. They crept across the ceiling, pooled around the furniture, and I could feel them pressing, crawling over my legs and chest, each touch leaving a cold, slimy residue that smelled faintly of rust and decay. My reflection in the darkened windows flickered, and for a heartbeat I saw him there, mirrored sunglasses gleaming, coat slicked with something dark and wet, a single coin spinning between his fingers like a hypnotic pendulum, measuring not time, but my fear. Days later, I dared to call the old gas station. The building was abandoned, silent except for the faint echo of coins clinking in the empty night. But when I peeked through the cracked windows, the shelves were lined with rows upon rows of silver quarters, spinning slowly in place like tiny mechanical hearts, synchronized to some unholy rhythm. The air shimmered around them, thick with metallic fog, curling in coils that seemed almost alive, pressing against the glass like fingers that wanted to drag me inside. I could swear I saw faces pressed against the coin surfaces, mouths opening and closing in silent screams, eyes hollow and accusing, and I felt bile rise in my throat. The floorboards creaked under invisible weight, a rhythm matching the whispers that had begun to echo through the walls, the pipes, even the air I breathed. And then I realized the horror I'd been avoiding for so long. I wasn't just being counted. I had become part of the collection. Every coin he left behind, every whispered number, every hour he returned. It had all been building toward this. Now, even miles away, I feel the counting continue. My heartbeat sinks to it. My thoughts fracture with it. And I know he is patient. He will wait. And when the tally reaches its final number, there will be nothing left of me but a cold, spinning quarter in his collection, reflecting the empty, mirrored eyes of a collector who has already claimed me entirely. I try to sleep. I try to ignore it. But the clinking follows me in every shadow, in every reflection, in every breath. And I know the counting will never end, not until he decides it does. I'm Mark Reynolds, living in a quiet suburb of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Just a regular dad, trying to balance work and family life. My wife was out of town for a conference, and my daughter, Emily, was at school like any normal Thursday. I thought it would be just another quiet day at home, until I heard her laugh. The thing is, she wasn't home, not even close. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to drown out the quiet. The house felt off, not the usual, peaceful quiet of a Thursday morning. It was heavier, like the walls themselves were watching me. I told myself it was nothing, just me being paranoid with my wife out of town and Emily at school. But then I heard it. At first, I thought I was imagining it, a soft, high laugh. Light and carefree, drifting through the hallway like someone was hiding just out of sight. My stomach flipped. That laugh, it wasn't just any laugh, it was Emily's. Her laugh. Only she was at school. I froze, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone. "Emily?" I called, voice louder than I meant. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the old wall clock. Then I heard it again, closer this time, bouncing from the far side of the living room. A chill crawled up my spine. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of the mind, but the sound was too real, too clear. I got up slowly, every step echoing, and moved toward the hallway. That's when I noticed the faint smell, like wet dirt and something metallic, coppery, drifting under the regular scent of the kitchen. My pulse hammered. My eyes darted down the hallway. Shadows stretched where they shouldn't, and the faint scrape of something sliding across the hardwood made my stomach twist. I didn't know if I wanted to run or stay. My feet moved on their own toward Emily's room. The closer I got, the more the house felt alive, breathing in time with me. Then I heard it again, soft this time, coming from the bedroom doorway behind me. A whisper, delicate but unmistakable. "Daddy!" It wasn't playful. It was hollow, stretched out in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. I turned slowly, convinced I'd see her standing there. Nothing. Just the room, empty. curtains swaying lightly from the faint breeze of the AC vent. My chest tightened, and my hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. When it hit the floor, the laughter came back, this time not soft, but echoing, bouncing between the walls like it was everywhere at once. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, eyes scanning every corner of the house I thought I knew. That's when I noticed the tiny scratches on the floorboards leading from the hallway toward the kitchen. Small, shallow, almost like fingernails. But Emily had never touched them. My mind screamed to rationalize it, but a cold, unnatural fear gripped me. Something was here. Something had her laugh, her voice, her face, but not her. And I had no idea what it wanted. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the house playing tricks on me, or maybe a neighbor's kid sneaking around. But then I saw it, a flicker in the corner of my eye, a dark shape that didn't belong, low to the ground, moving too fast to be anything normal. I froze. My own breathing sounded deafening in the quiet. I reached toward the light switch, but when I flipped it on, the shadows didn't go away. They shifted, stretching, curling, pooling along the edges of the room like black smoke. My heart raced and my stomach turned sour. Then I heard it, a soft scraping, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway behind me. Something was walking, not running, not hurried, just walking, dragging across the wooden floor. I swallowed hard and turned. Empty hallway. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold onto the edge of the counter. The air felt different, thicker, colder, wet somehow, like a storm had passed through the house, even though the sun was shining outside. And through it all, I could hear the laughter again, faint but unmistakable, floating just beyond the hallway, teasing me, calling me. I forced myself forward, toward the source, though every instinct screamed to run. The hallway seemed longer now, darker, the walls bending inward just enough to make my eyes ache. That's when I saw them, tiny handprints, smeared in something red on the hardwood, fresh. My stomach lurched. I know it wasn't Emily, she wasn't home. My mind reeled, but I couldn't look away. The faint whisper followed, soft and cold. "Daddy, don't leave me." My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. Then a shadow darted across the far wall, fast, almost too fast to track. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving the house unnervingly still, except for the faint echo of that laugh, lingering as if it had soaked into the walls. Something about it was wrong. Too sharp, too long, almost hollow, like it wasn't just a sound, but a living thing inside the air. I wanted to back up, to leave the house entirely, but the hallway behind me had changed. Where there should have been plain doors, there was only darkness, stretching downward like a mouth waiting to swallow me. And in the very corner of my vision, I saw movement again, small, quick, crawling toward the kitchen, low to the ground, too fast, too precise. My heart hammered. I realized with a sickening certainty that the laughter wasn't just following me. It was guiding something that wanted me to see it. And I knew, deep down, the thing behind it wasn't my daughter. I had to keep moving. My legs felt like lead, my chest burning, but I couldn't stop. The hallway seemed endless now, warped in a way that made every corner look like a trap. The laughter followed, bouncing off the walls, twisting, getting louder, sharper. And then I saw it. Behind the coat rack, almost invisible, a narrow wooden door that I had never noticed in 7 years of living here. It was small, dark, and too perfect, like it had been waiting. My hand hovered over the knob, freezing in the cold that radiated from it. I told myself it was just an old utility closet, maybe some leftover construction mistake. But the smell coming from it, damp, rotten, metallic, made bile rise in my throat. I twisted the knob. It resisted at first, stiff, then gave way with a heavy creak, revealing a crawl space that seemed deeper than it should. I could see dust swirling in a faint shaft of light from the hallway, and something low and hunched in the corner. I froze. My mind couldn't catch up, couldn't rationalize what I was seeing. The figure inside was small, hunched, almost childlike, but wrong. The clothes, the hair, even the shape of its head reminded me of Emily. But the smile was too wide, stretched in a way that didn't belong to any human face. Its eyes glimmered in the dark, too black, too empty, and yet somehow aware of me. The crawl space smelled worse the closer I got, a mixture of damp wood, rot, and something sickly sweet. I noticed the walls were lined with scratches, deep, jagged, like claws had scraped them from the inside. The figure tilted its head, and a laugh bubbled up from deep inside its throat, warped and hollow, echoing off the tiny walls and curling around my mind. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the threshold, and slammed the door shut. My hands shook, leaving streaks of dirt, or was it blood, across the handle. The hallway fell quiet for a moment, but the house was not at peace. The shadows seemed to lean in, pressing closer. And then I realized the laughter hadn't stopped. It had just moved, now coming from everywhere at once, from the floors, the walls, and the ceiling. Something had been waiting inside that hidden space, something that knew my house, my family, and had been playing with me, dragging me closer to it. I felt its awareness, a crawling intelligence that wanted me to find it, to see it, to feel the fear it had been feeding on all along. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just being followed, I was being hunted. I ran to the kitchen, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the knife I had grabbed from the drawer. The laughter, it wasn't just inside the walls anymore. It was moving, slipping under doors, climbing up from the vents, crawling along the floors. I could feel it pressing against me, brushing my arms and legs like cold fingers reaching from the dark. The lights flickered, once, twice, then went out completely, leaving me in a blackness so thick it seemed solid. I dropped the knife, my foot catching on something soft, something wet. I turned my head just in time to see a smear across the floor, a streak of dark red that hadn't been there a moment ago. My stomach turned. My phone had died. No sound except the laugh, growing louder, sharper, twisting in the air, and now it wasn't alone. There were whispers too, tiny, urgent, crawling from every corner. "Daddy, come play, don't leave me." My back pressed against the counter. The air smelled like iron and damp, wood, and I felt something brush past my neck. Something cold, alive. I spun around, nothing. But the shadows seemed to ripple now, bending unnaturally, pooling in the corners as if something solid was moving inside them. Then I saw her, or it. At the end of the kitchen, in the doorway leading to the living room, a small figure stood, rocking slightly, arms dangling too long, head tilting, and that smile stretched impossibly wide. The clothes were Emily's, her hair, her voice, but not her. It laughed, high-pitched and wrong, and I could see the hollow black eyes glinting in the dim light. My stomach dropped to my feet, and I stumbled backward over the smeared floor, heart hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. I thought I could hear bones cracking under its movements, joints bending the wrong way. It moved in a way that shouldn't have been possible, crawling, tilting, jerking, but it never fell, never stopped. I wanted to leave, but the door I had come in through was gone. The hallway had warped again, stretching impossibly, twisting like the house itself had decided to trap me inside. And through it all, The laughter followed me, echoing off the walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere, like it was alive and hungry for fear. I realized then, with a sinking, paralyzing horror, that whatever had been hiding in the crawl space had followed me out. It was learning, watching, and waiting. And it wanted me to know leaving the house would not save me. It would follow. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the motel room, lights off, ears straining for anything, every creak of the building setting my heart racing. I kept imagining Emily's laugh, that warped, hollow sound coming from the shadows of the room, sliding under the door, crawling along the walls. I kept thinking I saw movement in the corners of my eyes, dark shapes stretching, shifting, almost reaching for me. But when I turned, nothing was there. My hand shook so badly I couldn't hold a cup of coffee, my stomach in knots, my mind replaying the image of that figure in the crawl space. The smile too wide, the eyes too empty, the way it had moved, so wrong, so impossible. I called the police in the morning, trying to make sense of what had happened, telling myself they would see it, find it, explain it. They didn't. The house looked normal, nothing out of place, no scratches, no red streaks, no hidden door. I wanted to cry, to scream, to tell someone, anyone, but the words stuck in my throat. And the worst part? Emily came home from school, laughing like nothing had happened, cheerful, alive, innocent. I wanted to hug her, to feel safe again, but I couldn't shake the memory of the thing in the crawl space. That smile, those hollow eyes, the laughter. That night, I went to the bathroom to wash my hands and maybe shake off the panic when I saw it. In the mirror behind me, just for a moment, a small figure standing in the doorway of the motel room. Not Emily, but wearing her clothes, same size, same hair, head tilted, the smile impossibly wide, eyes black as voids. I froze, unable to look away, heart pounding like a hammer, every muscle locked in terror. The air around me grew heavy, cold, smelling faintly of wet wood and iron, like it had followed me here, tracking me, learning where I would hide. Then I heard it, soft, slow, deliberate, laughing from behind me, from inside the glass itself. It sounded right next to my ear, yet somehow echoing through the whole room. I turned quickly, nothing. But when I faced the mirror again, it was closer, smiling, tilting its head, hands just barely visible at its sides, moving in ways a body shouldn't move. My knees buckled, and I realized it didn't want to hurt me. At least, not like that. It wanted me to see, to know, to understand that it wasn't going anywhere, that the house, the laughter, the shadows, it all came with me. And even now, staring at the empty doorway reflected in the glass, I can feel it, watching, waiting, learning, and I know it will follow me everywhere I go, until one day, maybe, it will take me too. I never expected to find dozens of shoes waiting for me in my hallway. My name is Clara Jensen, and I live alone on the 12th floor of 432 West 57th Street in Manhattan. I got home last Friday evening, juggling grocery bags, my mind still half stuck at work, and froze dead in the hallway outside my apartment. Dozens of shoes were lined up with unnatural precision along the floor, stretching from the elevator to my door. They were all my size, my sneakers, my boots, the heels I wore once to a friend's wedding. But that wasn't what made me shiver. Each pair was arranged as if someone had stood in them, waited, and then stepped perfectly into place. My palms went clammy, and I dropped the bags, the heavy thud echoing off the walls, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I live 12 stories up. There's no balcony wide enough for this. No stairwell access that would make it possible for anyone to leave shoes here without me noticing. And yet, there they were, dozens of them, as if the building itself had decided to mock me. The closer I stepped, the more I realized some of them weren't even shoes anymore. They were warped, blackened, scuffed in ways I didn't remember, like they had been worn through something unspeakable, and yet still somehow recognizable. A faint smell hit me then, a mix of old leather and something metallic that reminded me of blood just under the edge of my nose. My heartbeat started hammering in my ears, and the fluorescent lights above flickered in rapid, violent bursts, casting long, jittering shadows that seemed to twist and crawl along the walls. I tried to scream, but my throat locked, and all I could do was inch forward, my fingers trembling as I traced the outline of a cracked heel. The second I touched it, a whisper brushed against my mind, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me stagger back. Finally, I dropped to my knees, fumbling for my keys like a frightened child, desperate to shut the door between me and whatever this was. My gaze darted up and down the hall, half expecting a face to appear, a figure to step from behind the shadows, but there was nothing, just shoes, dozens, maybe hundreds, all perfectly aligned, all staring at me, almost like they were alive. I could swear one of the boots twitched ever so slightly, a slow, deliberate shudder, and I stumbled backward, bumping against the wall, my mind screaming that this was impossible, that none of this could be real. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor, and when I picked it up, the battery was dead. Dead. No signal. Nothing. Just black. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. At first, just the distant hum of the building, the muffled traffic far below, but then a soft scraping, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across concrete, coming from somewhere beyond the shoes. I froze. Tears, stinging, heart pounding, and whispered a shaky, "Who's there?" The hallway responded with nothing but a hollow, echoing silence, and then a slow, deliberate click, the sound of a heel shifting on the floor, inching closer, closer to my door. I wanted to run, to slam the door, to call someone, anyone, but my legs wouldn't obey. And in that moment, I understood. Whatever had placed the shoes here didn't want me to leave, didn't want me to escape, and it was patient enough to wait for me to understand that. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, a sick joke left by someone with far too much time and no respect for boundaries, but nothing about the hallway outside my apartment suggested humor. When I returned from work the next evening, dragging my tired body and groceries behind me, the shoes had multiplied. Not just a few extra pairs. There were more than I could count, stretching the entire corridor, twisting and snaking like a black river of leather and rubber. Some were mine, some looked vaguely familiar, but warped in ways I couldn't place. Smeared with dirt, scuffed, even cracked in ways that suggested they had been forced to endure weight they weren't meant for. My stomach knotted as I stepped closer, noticing the faint sound of squeaking leather, like someone dragging their feet slowly along the hallway floor, though the air was still and the building otherwise silent. My pulse thumped so hard I thought it might explode in my ears. I tried to step back, and that's when I saw it. A pair of my old running shoes, the ones I thought I had donated years ago, were now standing perfectly upright, side by side, their laces twisting like veins, twitching as if alive. I blinked. Nothing had moved. But the next second, I could swear they inched forward. The elevator dinged somewhere behind me, and the metal door slid open with a creak that was far too slow, as if reluctant to release whatever waited inside. I froze in place, gripping my keys, my vision darting along the hallway where shadows now seemed to thicken and stretch toward me, forming shapes I could almost recognize. Legs, arms, a hint of a face. But every time I focused, the shapes dissolved back into the inanimate mass of shoes. When I turned toward the elevator, I caught my reflection in the dull steel panel and nearly screamed. It wasn't me, or at least not entirely. My hair hung in greasy tangles, my skin paled almost to gray, and my eyes felt like they weren't fully my own, wider, frantic, desperate. And behind me, just at the edge of the hallway's dim light, a figure lingered, impossibly thin, dark as a shadow, frozen in place but exuding a weight of menace that pressed on my chest. I spun around. Nothing. Just shoes. Thousands of them, forming tiny hills, lining every corner, every space between the walls and my apartment door, all pointing inward like jagged teeth. I backed toward my door, fumbling with the lock, when the elevator pinged again and the doors hesitated, rhythm slowing, stopping halfway, the interior dark and impenetrable. Then I heard the faintest whisper, almost beneath the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Step inside." My hand froze on the doorknob. Something was waiting. In that elevator, something patient, something that had been watching me through the flicker of shadows. I didn't know what it wanted, or if I wanted to find out, but I knew, with a clarity that made my teeth chatter and my knees wobble, that if I didn't leave that hallway now, I might never get out at all. And yet, as I pressed my back against the door, I realized the shoes weren't just outside. They were moving, inching closer, silently, deliberately, filling every inch of the corridor, like they were herding me toward the one place I feared most, the elevator. By Wednesday, I felt like I was unraveling. Sleep had abandoned me completely, leaving only a tight, constant panic coiling in my chest. I didn't leave my apartment except to glance through the peephole, and even then, the hallway seemed alive with movement. Every time I looked, the shoes had multiplied. They weren't just arranged neatly anymore. They formed clusters, mounds, creeping along the edges of the walls as if inching closer, silently observing me. Some of them weren't even shoes anymore. I could swear I saw faint impressions of toes pressing through leather, a sole bending unnaturally, as though something heavy had stepped down from inside it. I could hear it then, a dragging, scraping sound that seemed to echo from every corner, growing louder the longer I stared. My knees buckled as I backed toward the door, knife clutched so tightly I thought I'd snap it in half. And that's when I noticed the first blood. Not my own, not human exactly, but a dark, sticky smear across the hallway carpet, leading in a trail from the elevator to the nearest cluster of my old shoes. One of the sneakers at the head of the line twitched, lifted slightly, and with a wet, slapping sound, moved toward my door as though testing my defenses. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself down the stairwell, but my body refused to obey. The shoes weren't just outside. They were waiting, hunting, calculating, and I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that this wasn't a prank, and it wasn't a warning. It was the beginning of something that would not stop. Later that night, I woke to the sound of my door rattling violently. The chain lock, which I'd thought secure, had been forced almost open. My heart hammering, I grabbed my knife and pressed myself flat against the wall, listening. Footsteps, dozens of them, scraped and shuffled across the carpet outside, and then I saw it through the peephole. The shoes were moving, not rolling or falling. They were walking, one after the other, sliding forward with a deliberate pace, forming a solid, undulating wall inching toward me. My stomach churned as a sickening thought hit me. The shapes inside the shoes weren't just shadows. They were alive. tiny glimpses of limbs bent in impossible angles, occasionally flickering as if something grotesque were trying to emerge. I swung my knife blindly when a boot slammed against the door, passing through it like smoke. My scream tore through the apartment as the door shook violently. I could feel them pressing against the wood, their collective weight mounting, a relentless force that I knew I could never overpower. And in that moment, as the whispering grew louder, the dragging of souls became pounding, and the shadows pressed closer, I understood something terrifying. They weren't just outside. They were inside me too, in my thoughts, feeding on my fear, and there was no way I could run or hide. Whatever this was, it was beginning its hunt, and I was the prey. By Friday, I was a shell of myself. The attack from earlier in the week had left me trembling, unable to sleep. My apartment barricaded with anything I could drag against the door. I hadn't left in days, and the hallway outside had become something unrecognizable. A living, writhing mass of shoes. They weren't neatly lined anymore. They clustered like predators waiting just beyond sight, shuffling and sliding in ways that seemed deliberate, almost intelligent. Some of them weren't even shoes anymore. The leather warped, soles cracking as though something had grown inside them. I could hear hundreds of faint whispers, overlapping into a deafening chorus of distant cries and high-pitched screeches, all echoing inside my skull. The air was thick with the metallic tang of something long dead, and my skin crawled. Then I noticed it, a note scrawled across my wall in a dark, wet substance that dripped down like blood. It read, "You shouldn't have left." My fingers shook violently as I traced the letters, realizing the substance wasn't drying. It pulsated slightly, like it was alive. At that moment, the soft scraping of shoes outside my door became louder, synchronized, deliberate, as though they were pressing me toward a single path, corralling me with patience that made my chest tighten and my stomach churn. With no way to flee, I followed that path. The hallway stretched impossibly, walls bending into shadowed arches I didn't remember seeing, the carpet underfoot growing unnaturally soft, almost like flesh. I could feel the pressure of hundreds of shoes pressing inward, surrounding me on all sides, and glimpses of shapes flickered inside them, limbs bent impossibly, torsos twitching like broken dolls, faces twisted in frozen screams. Every step made the whispers louder, overlapping with guttural growls, shrill wails, and the sick, wet squelching of souls dragging across a floor that no longer seemed real. My knife felt useless, a tiny, meaningless object in the center of an impossible trap. At the end of the corridor, a circle of shoes awaited, perfectly arranged, almost ceremonial, with a darkness in its center so complete it absorbed every flicker of light from the hall. I understood then, in a gut-wrenching flash, that the shoes weren't guiding me, they were hurting me. And the figure waiting in the blackness, formless yet tangible, patient and eternal, was preparing to make its presence known. I felt the first real surge of panic since the attacks began. This was no longer just a hunt. This was a descent into something beyond understanding, and the last line had already been drawn. The shoes had corralled me completely. The hallway beneath my apartment had dissolved into a living maze of shadows and leather, walls breathing in rhythm with my pounding heartbeat. Each step I took toward the center circle of shoes felt heavier than the last, as if invisible hands were pressing down on me, rooting me to the soft, spongy floor. The shapes inside the shoes, limbs bent impossibly, faces frozen in silent screams, flickered in my peripheral vision, and I realized, with a shiver that went straight through my bones, that they weren't just shadows. They were echoes of something that had once lived, once moved, once breathed, and now existed only to trap me here. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself into the walls, but every motion was sluggish, like wading through water, and the whispers had become intelligible, low, sibilant voices chanting my name in distorted tones that vibrated directly inside my skull. The darkness in the center of the circle seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting, and I felt its weight before I even saw it. A formless figure, towering, faceless, but with a presence that pressed down on me with cold inevitability. The shoes shuffled inward, forming a wall that pressed me closer and closer to that darkness, leather and rubber wrapping around me like a living thing, suffocating, holding, forcing me to the edge of something I couldn't yet comprehend. Every heartbeat echoed in my ears, every breath felt stolen, and the air smelled of damp earth, iron, and decay. I realized then that this was no ordinary horror. Whatever this was, it had waited years, maybe lifetimes, to claim someone like me. And then the figure moved, or maybe it had been moving all along, and I was only now able to see it. A low, wet sound accompanied its approach, like a dozen shoes slapping against the flesh of the hallway at once. The darkness coalesced into a shape vaguely humanoid, taller than any human, limbs impossibly long, fingers curling like twisted roots, faceless but radiating awareness, hunger, and patience. I tried to step back, but the shoes pressed, a tide of worn leather and twisted laces, lifting me slightly, carrying me forward, forcing me into the center. I clawed at the shoes, stabbed at the darkness, screamed until my throat burned raw, but it was no use. My own shoes twitched violently, lifting as if alive, the soles twisting around me like restraints, binding me in place. And then it whispered, directly into my mind, a cold, wet rasp. "You're mine now. You always were." I could feel it moving inside me, the shoes feeding on my fear, my panic, my very essence. And then I woke up in my apartment, sunlight spilling through the window. The world calm, ordinary, too ordinary. My phone had battery, the door locked, the hallway silent. For a moment, I dared to hope it was over, until I noticed it. A single red heel, standing perfectly upright in the center of my kitchen floor, its leather scuffed, laces twisting like veins. I haven't left my apartment since. I don't answer the elevator. I don't open the door. And every night when the lights go out, I dream of the shoes, perfectly lined, waiting for me in the hallway, inching closer, whispering my name. Waiting, because I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that one day they will come for me again, and next time there will be no waking.